I think we remember where we were when Wave 5 dropped. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's like the shortest intro I'm going to be making for this review. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the annual tradition of reviewing a DLC of a now 9-year-old game that refuses to die. Wave 4 was certainly a pleasant surprise to many fans, especially with the confirmation that we'll be getting brand new characters, starting with Birdo. Beyond that, the courses were surprisingly good, especially more so in my case since my initial review. That being the case, when Wave 5's trailer dropped, oh boy, it was something that we didn't expect, both from the direct and the trailer. Needless to say, the hype was unreal. Now that Wave 5 is out for all to enjoy, I figured it's high time for me to make a review. So, will Wave 5 be as amazing as ever, or will it just be kinda meh? Let's jump right in and find out. Now, before I go on, I should make a quick mention to the 3 new playable characters that have entered the roster. Petey Pirahna, Wiggler, and Kamek have all made their debut in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and their inclusion is nothing short of amazing. Obviously glad to see Petey Pirahna once again, being the best plant that he is. Although his new voice sounds kinda weird. Not sure how I feel about it, but it works well enough, I suppose. Wiggler is a surprising but nice addition to have in the roster. Glad to see his anger mechanic remain intact, although the lack of an accompanying train sound does feel jarring not to hear, coming from somebody that has played Mario Kart 7 before. Now Kamek, on the other hand, feels like a journey coming to an end. From him being snuck back in Mario Kart 64, to being scrapped in 8 and Wii U, to finally being in a Mario Kart game tour, Kamek has come a long way to earn his spot in the roster, and I couldn't be any more happier. Welcome to the roster, Kamek. Now, with all that being said, let's fly right into the courses, starting with the Feather Cup. Opening up the Feather Cup is a rather appropriate city track given the association with feathers. Of course, I'm referring to Athens Avenue. No, I'm not going to call it its official name, even though it doesn't really bother me as much anymore. Athens Avenue has always been one of the most unique city courses in Tour, purely because it doesn't feel like a city track at all. For most of the course, you spend time on the Acropolis, with one variant taking you through a small portion of a town. It definitely gives some breather of fresh air in a sea of otherwise very similar city tracks, which allows it to stand out more. The same applies here in 8 Deluxe, where the track looks absolutely stunning. It doesn't feel as rushed as the Tour original. Well, if you ignore the town, that is. Now that is pretty rough. Other than that glaring detail, Athens Avenue is a perfectly fine course that, in some ways, feels a bit off. That might be due to the fact that the 3rd variant hasn't been out yet, but nonetheless, there's just some things about the track that doesn't sit well with me, namely some turns and especially the half-pipes. Though in subsequent playthroughs since, it's not completely bad. Oh well, at least the music is just as amazing as ever, maybe even better than the original perhaps? It kinda sounds like it builds up on the original a ton more, and as a result, it might be the most samey tour track I've ever heard. Which is a good thing! Take notes, Berlin byways. Nonetheless, Athens Avenue is a pretty good city track that's only hindered by the smaller details. Not a big deal or anything, just thought I'd mention it before we move on to something more relaxing. Speaking of relaxing, next up is the beloved fan favorite Daisy Cruiser from Mario Kart Double Dash. Now this course was pretty expected to come to the Booster Course Pass. I mean, it had to happen eventually, but oh my god. Words can't describe how this course looks. It is absolutely stunning to see, with the interior being my favorite part of the whole track. I mean, I was never big on how it looked in Tour, but slap on some extra detailing and voila! You got yourself a pretty inviting and comforting cruise ship, which makes the music all the more fitting. I absolutely adore this rendition of Daisy Cruiser, and while I do prefer the original more, I just can't help but love this rendition too. Gameplay wise, there's been a couple of things that were retained and added, like the ever iconic moving tables, now seated apparently. I don't think that's safe. My favorite addition though has to be the added Goombas onto the pool. Not only is it a cute detail, but it kinda also adds in a risk versus reward scenario for the players to decide. Even though just now I realize the Goombas don't actually hurt you, they just kinda push you back. Makes sense, I guess? As far as criticisms go, I guess it mostly has to do with the track taking a while to go through certain sections, like the start. Not really anything too major otherwise. Daisy Cruiser is a pretty beautiful course that doesn't do anything too outstanding, but provides an enriching experience that definitely fits the summer season. Maybe not really the same length as Waluigi Stadium as one of my favorite GCN tracks in A Deluxe, but it's still good enough, I'll at least admit that. Up next is the surprising addition of Moonview Highway. When this track was first revealed, I couldn't believe the fact that we would be getting 2 Wii tracks for this wave. Moonview Highway has always been the most interesting and challenging traffic course in Mario Kart, so its inclusion here just makes things all the more interesting. I gotta say right off the bat, this course looks absolutely gorgeous. Never has the moonlight been more emphasized than in this iteration, and the city portion isn't too bad as well, though the tunnel could be a tad bit brighter. Gameplay wise, it seems to play the same as it did in Wii, so with keen eye will notice that the city portion has been shortened a bit. Not that it's a bad thing, but I figure I should point it out. As well as the traffic being a little slower, which is really my only real complaint for this track, as well as many others. I just don't get why Nintendo doesn't really add in the speed for these traffic courses. It just makes them kind of feel unnoteworthy and a little bit too easy. Especially Toad's Turnpike. But I'll be saving that little rant for another day. Also, bomb cars are in Mario Kart 8 and I couldn't be any happier. If it wasn't obvious, this is easily one of my favorite courses to come out of this wave. And while it probably doesn't reach the same heights as some of my more general favorites in the game, the fact that I'm this impressed with this course is a really good thing. Definitely one of my favorites in Wave 5. Rounding out the Feather Cup is the newly added Nitro course that we've come to expect for every wave. This time taking us through a literal bathroom. Yep. Squeaky Clean Sprint definitely showed a good first impression back in the June Direct, with it being a lot more ambitious than many would have thought. In the following months though, I was worried that I wouldn't really like the track nearly as much upon release, and now that it's out, well, I was kinda right initially, but man did it grow on me really quickly. Squeaky Clean Sprint has a lot to throw at you, and I mean a lot. From tricking above bath bombs to traversing through a drain system, and even gliding across a literal toilet, Squeaky Clean Sprint throws everything at you to make things feel all the more chaotic. In some ways, I like this, simply because it keeps you on your toes while racing through the entirety of the bathroom. It even changes slightly once lap 2 hits, or a certain amount of time has being passed, where another route becomes accessible. That being said, I do have some things to critique. Sometimes the course can get a bit overwhelming, with so much to look at for just a simple layout, such as the end stretch having a couple of routes I didn't realize were there in the first time I played through. Speaking of layout, I feel like the track gets a little too wide at times, mainly the beginning of the track, whereas the drain section just feels too narrow to traverse. Maybe it's just me that's feeling this, but nonetheless, this doesn't make the course any bad to play on. I could see myself coming back to this a decent bit, especially with the visuals being very full of bathroom objects and references to the Mario series, and the music being one of my favorites. Overall, while I wouldn't really say this is my favorite Nitro course ever, this would still probably go to Yoshi's Island or Ninja Hideaway, I would say it's a pretty decent way to end the Feather Cup, and a pretty good track overall at that. Originally, I was going to write off the Feather Cup as a bit of a mixed bag, but man, could I be any more wrong than that, because the Feather Cup might just be one of my favorites in the DLC. I don't really find myself hating about most of the courses in the Feather Cup, even some of the ones that I would consider to be kind of weak in that regard, that being Athens Dash, which isn't really a bad course at all. DZ Cruiser is a relaxing and beautiful gauntlet through a cruise ship, Moonview High was just really good, and Squeaky Clean Sprint has won me over as of making this video, so yeah, it's clear that Moonview Highway and Squeaky Clean Sprint are the clear standouts in the Feather Cup. But that's not to dismiss Daisy Cruiser and Athens Avenue, because these two courses are really good as well. They just don't stand out as much as Moonview Highway and Squeaky Clean Sprint, at least to me anyways. Man, with how pleased I sound for the Feather Cup, I'm sure the Cherry Cup might just be as good, maybe even better, right? Right? Let's just get this over with. Starting up the Cherry Cup, we have a course that I've been looking forward to for quite a bit now. Los Angeles Labs. Now, if there's one thing that I knew would happen, it would be that LA Labs could be a section-based track. And well, yeah, that's exactly what LA Labs turned out to be. For the routes given to the track, it all flows surprisingly well, albeit I'm not sure how I feel about the final lap taking place in the oil fields. But I'll let that slide considering the pacing is pretty solid on this track. Plus it gets extra points for having this neat glider ramp that's completely optional, but you can't actually get on that ramp without using a mushroom, which is pretty nice. One of the critiques that I hear for this track are both the atmosphere and the music. The atmosphere for the track now takes place at daytime instead of sunset. And I mean, yeah, I can see how that's disappointing to some, but to be honest, I actually like it more than I thought. Yeah, I still prefer if it were at sunset, but the daylight shining down around the city just feels a little more better, I suppose. And the music, well yeah, the bombs are now completely absent, just feels much nicer to listen to in comparison to the original. I feel like it's a similar case to Berlin Byways in the sense that you could mash up both versions, and they would sound pretty great. Regardless, I did not expect to like Los Angeles Labs as much as I did. I figured it would be one of my least favorites, but I didn't expect this outcome. This might be one of my favorite city courses in 8 Deluxe, up there with Bangkok Rush and Berlin Byways. I must say, this is a great start to the Cherry Cup. Hopefully the tracks can only get better from here. You all saw this coming. Now, Sunset Wilds is a course that many have been anticipating for quite some time now. I mean, aside from Sky Garden, Sunset Wilds is considered to be a fan favorite across many, and I can definitely see why with the sun slowly setting as the laps progressed. Now it's finally here in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and, well, let's just focus on the positives first before we talk about the elephant in the room. And I don't mean Mario. Well then. Visually, this track looks absolutely gorgeous. It seems to have taken cues from Riverside Park before, and I gotta say, that's a very good thing. It makes this track feel pleasing to the eyes, especially with the smaller details like the reflection of the mud giving it that gold color. The music, as expected, is pretty good too. It might be my favorite rendition of the track as a whole, music-wise anyways. Special mentions to the Shy Guy bit where at first I thought this was like, you know, Wario's Gold Mine with the Shy Guy variants, but I'm pretty sure it's just the Shy Guys making sound effects and it's not really part of the track, but I could be wrong. Let me know down in the comments below if that's the case. And yeah, that's all the positives I have to say about the track. Let's just address this right now. The layout is honestly the least of my worries when it comes to how Sunset Wilds is handled in 8 Deluxe. I mean, not many fans were thrilled about the fact that the track barely has any elevation and is more shortened than before, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say that at least the layout still resembles the original to some extent instead of whatever Sky Garden did.
Oh man, what the heck?
You know, I wouldn't mind it as much, so long as I see that sun setting. Okay, lap 2 doesn't trigger it. It's okay, maybe it'll be kinda like Tour where it sets around the final lap. Yeah, that's, the sun doesn't set. What? This right there is the real problem that everyone's been having with this remake. The fact that Sunset Wilds, a course known for having the sun set down as the laps progressed, doesn't have a setting sun. And you better believe it that a lot of fans were not happy about this. At all. Now granted, when I discovered it myself, I was mostly disappointed with near silence. I wasn't like overreacted when it didn't occur, I was just disappointed. And that's the best way I can describe this course. It seems like such a minor small detail to some of you, but it's not anyone's fault that this is how it was back in the GBA, and even Mario Kart Tour, a mobile game mind you, has the gimmick intact. I just don't understand why Nintendo had to ruin 2 fan favorite courses from Super Circuit. Except, there is a possible explanation for Sunset Wilds. It seems like it mostly has to do with how the game's lighting engine works, and some have said that it would be impossible for 8 to have the sun set with those intact. Now granted, you should take that information with a grain of salt, because I've definitely seen some videos where they did show that it could very well be possible, in a messy way of course, but it's still possible nonetheless. So if it was truly impossible for this mechanic to ever work in Mario Kart 8's lighting engine, then why would you ever bring back Sunset Wilds to begin with? Sure, it's a fan favorite, but I'd rather have it be replaced by something like Yoshi Desert instead of losing the one thing it's been known for. Honestly speaking, even after my initial reaction, Sunset Wilds is a really disappointing course. The track on its own isn't bad, it's still a pretty decent one at that. But man, the way it's been handled is just a depressing sight. Well, that might have been a blunder, but at least that's just one. Are you kidding me? Koopa Kip is another course that many were anticipating to see in the Booster Course Pass, given how it's a beloved fan favorite much like pretty much every Wii track in the DLC. With that said though, this was a course I feared for the most, since most of, if not all of the courses are based on their tour remakes, and Koopa Kip's in particular hasn't been the most praised. But I mean, sure, Nintendo could very well change the course up to be at least decent than it is, so let's see what we got. Well, it's better than how it looked in tour, alright. Yeah, this course, even with the enhanced graphics and visuals, is very rough to look at, especially in certain sections too, like the inside of this cave. I'll at least give some credit and say that the water does look pretty nice. I honestly don't really get the complaint of it looking dirty initially, and while yeah, the music doesn't compare to the Wii original, I'd still say it's a pretty good rendition. It even brought back the river version that was absent in Mario Kart 7 and Tour, so props to that. As for how it plays, well at first I wasn't really sure about that, since everything was just a blur my first time playing through. But after subsequent plays, it became a little more complicated. Originally, I wrote off the track as being unfit to play on 8 Deluxe, but a few more times playing through it and yeah, I was completely wrong. This track still feels fun to play through, despite its graphics being kinda lacking. I do like the addition of anti-gravity in the tube section. It makes for a very fast and frantic part of the track, even if the half-pipes are as janky as ever. Despite all that though, there's still some critiques I have to say. Yeah, I do prefer the track to retain the electric obstacles from the original, rather than opening up the tube as a whole. I mean, I even thought of an alternative with the use of jelly beams or even Gelectro. And I know this sounds incredibly minor, but these ramps look so out of place. I know the course is based on its tour model, but when most of every other course has to alter them in 8 Deluxe, it just kinda sticks out, especially what used to be the boost panel and the glider ramp. On the one hand, I'm fine with the glider not returning, but on the other hand, this feels wrong and somewhat unsatisfying. I don't know, I've seen a lot say that Koopa Kip is one of the better tracks in Wave 5, and while I won't deny it's still good, it's still kind of alright at the end of the day for me. Definitely not bad, but it could have been done a bit better. Rounding up the Cherry Cup is the more anticipated and well-beloved Vancouver Velocity. I'm gonna be honest, this course was one of my most hyped alongside Moonview Highway. The course was already pretty great in Tour, but to play an enhanced version with great music and potentially great routing? Sign me in, damn it! Of course, now that it's been a day since Wave 5 dropped, I can say that while Vancouver Velocity isn't a perfect conclusion, it's still a really great track. Of course, the presentation for this course is absolutely stellar. I especially love the suspension bridge with how pretty it all feels. It just makes for a very compelling experience alongside the fact that it has anti-gravity now, which was pretty obvious, let's admit it. Although, I don't know how to feel about the autumn trees. I don't know, it just looks weird. The music is also pretty great as well. Dare I say it might be my personal favorite ever. I do slightly prefer the original more, but I love them both equally enough, so that's a win in my book. In terms of routing, that's kind of my only main complaint with this track. It more so feels like an accurate representation of a tour fan's feeling towards the 3 variations, with the third lap being rather underwhelming since it's the very most or the least fond of. But really, that's just dependent on who you're asking. I personally find the route to be okay at best. Could have been better, but not bad for what we got. Overall, while Vancouver Velocity has a rather underwhelming end, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is still a pretty great track. Definitely one of my favorites as well, and a rather odd conclusion to Wave 5 at that. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, the Cherry Cup is easily one of the weakest cups in the Booster Course Pass for me. 2 fan favorites, while decent, are just kind of butchered at the end of the day. A pretty good, albeit underwhelming city to end on, and a really good section-based track that I didn't expect. Overall, very weak experience that really shouldn't have been that. Obviously, at least one course had the stick up for being pretty but I didn't think I would be disappointed with 2 in Wave 5. Now, before I end this review, you might notice that I haven't mentioned any changes for the current version. And the reasoning for this is pretty simple. It's not that noteworthy this time. Or, at least it would have been. It's come to my attention that apparently Kamek is currently the best character in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe right now, and I gotta say, he deserves it. Kamek deserves to be the best character for at least a couple of months, so yeah, other than that, there's nothing to write home about. It just kinda seems like we're probably not gonna get anything major by the time the DLC is over. Kinda reminds me of another game that offers 2 big changes. Maybe that's just me.
Well then.
With that said, this brings us to the end of this review. It's kinda crazy to think that Wave 5 turned out to be rather underwhelming, if not disappointing to some. Initially, I was disappointed too, but since I had some time to think and reflect, I do have to admit that for the most part, every course is fun to race through, even if things were missing before. Honestly, I'm not sure what to feel about Wave 5 even after its release. Definitely not the worst wave ever, but it doesn't compare to some of the greats. I'd say mid-tier is its best placement. Of course, I can't end the review without showing off the current tier list, so with that, here it is. This time I decided to change the tier list up a bit, since it's getting a bit crowded, and some of the courses don't naturally fit in their current placements. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching the video. Let me know down in the comments if you find Wave 5 to be enjoyable or disappointing, or which character do you enjoy playing the most. I'd love to know. And as always, remember that Stu cares about you.